unstated objection, what wait a minute, we crucified him. That's the objection. And the Quran is responding to that and saying, no, you didn't. But the objection, when they say in their own minds, but we crucified him, they're saying, we hung him on a cross until he died. That's the real point. And the Quran is saying, no, you didn't. So that's why the Quran ends by saying, وَمَا قَتَلُهُ يَقِينًا. They didn't kill him for certain. Now notice what else is mentioned here. But so it was made to appear to them. وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. The classical commentators on the Quran took that to mean that someone else was changed and made to look like Jesus, and that someone else was put on the cross. But in my research, I have found that idea to be unnecessary. To begin with, there is a problem, a grammatical problem with thinking of it that way, because a shubh usually means doubt, but it could also mean resemblance. Shabaha someone, something else, means he resembled something else. And that's the relation between the two ideas, shubh and resemblance, doubt and resemblance, is that if two things resemble each other, then you have a doubt as to which is which. Like you look at the two and you can't tell which is which, it seems a little bit doubtful. So the classical commentators, instead of thinking about the doubt that is implied in shubh halahum, they thought that it was made to, like someone else was made to look like Jesus and put on the cross instead. But then, look what else follows. Those who differ therein are full of doubts. So it's continuing the idea of shubh or shak. So once they had taken the first part to mean that someone else was made to look like Jesus, when they came to the second part about the shak, they had to explain now what doubt remained. Because if you say that someone was made to look like Jesus, so that the arresting party took him and they put him on the cross, that means in the view of everyone, this looks like Jesus. So now, after they have put him on the cross, what doubt remains? So the Mufassirun say that the doubt that remained is that when they looked at him, they saw that the face is the face of Jesus, but the body is the body of his companion. وَجْهُهُ وَجْهُ عِيسَى وَجِسْمُهُ جِسْمُ صَاحِبِهِ. That's what they said. Obviously what's happening here is that the commentators themselves have tied themselves into a knot, and they're trying to explain now how could the doubt remain. But the simple thing to understand from the beginning is that when they said shubbiha lahum meant that someone else was made to look like Isa alayhi salam, they missed an important point in that shubbiha is passive. It includes the damir mustatir. It includes his hidden pronoun. It's referring back to someone. It's referring back either to he or to it. Because in Arabic you can have it both ways. A pronoun in English can be either he, she, or it. And it is neutral. In Arabic there is no neutral. So every it is either a he or a she. So in the Arabic pronoun that refers to he can also refer to it. So in this case, it's not he was made to appear to them, it's it. It was made to appear to them. It's not he, Isa alayhi salam, that was made. But the commentators took it that he, Isa alayhi salam, was made to appear. But notice the problem with that, in that it's not Isa alayhi salam who was made to resemble someone else, it's the someone else who was made to resemble him according to that view. Right? According to what the Mufassirun have said, someone else was made to resemble Isa alayhi salam. Meanwhile, Isa alayhi salam was taken up into heaven, and the other person became the maslub. So it's the other person who was made to look like Isa alayhi salam is the maslub, who was changed. Not Isa was changed. He continued to look the way he always did. So if shubbiha lahum means that he was made to resemble the other one, then the he here is the maslub, the one who was actually crucified, the victim. But the victim wasn't mentioned yet. And they said in both, we killed Jesus Christ, the son of Mary, the messenger of God, but they killed him, Jesus, nor crucified him, Jesus, but but so it was made to appear to them. If you say, but he was made to resemble for them, as the classical commentators are saying, then that means Isa was made to resemble the other person. But as we've just seen, Isa wasn't made to resemble anyone. It's the other person who was made to resemble Isa alayhi salam. Commentators said, okay, that's not a problem. We can say this is a case of taqdeem wa ta'khir. You know, the thing that should have been mentioned last is mentioned first, and that is acceptable in the Arabic language. Moreover, it is implied that it's the maslub we're talking about, because now the story continues regarding him. Okay, that is an explanation. But we can see that a more sensible and reasonable overall explanation that takes into account every part of the statement and ties it in with other passages of the Quran, like we mentioned, the Jaza al-Muharibin, right? You tie it in with that, you see where qatl and salb are mentioned together. Look elsewhere else in the Quran where salb is mentioned. What does salb mean? It means to hang a person so that he dies from the hanging. When the Fir'aun threatens the magicians, 3 places in the Quran this is mentioned. He says, لَوْصَلِّبَنَّكُمْ, I am going to crucify you. He doesn't mean he's going to hang them for a moment and then take them back down. He means that he's going to hang them until they die. In Yusuf a.s. story, Yusuf tells one of his prison mates that he is going to be crucified so that the birds will eat from his head. Which means that's what usually happens to a crucified person. Person is left there to die, and when he dies, the vultures come and they eat his flesh. So that shows that salb means, in this case, he hangs on the cross until he dies. So the denial, ma salabuhu, means they did not kill him by this particular method. When we realize this then, we see how the Quranic narrative actually ties in with what we have already described. Because we have seen that scholars now, in their detailed research, are showing that Jesus, according to Dieter Zeller, who I mentioned earlier, that an earlier view than the now prevailing Christian view is that Jesus was taken up by God, assumed into heaven. Not that he came out of the tomb, met all of his disciples, and then was taken up into heaven. He was from his tomb, wherever he was already taken up. Moreover, Dieter Zeller has argued that the sign of Jonah meant that Jesus, among the various indications, was that the resemblance between Jesus and Jonah was that as Jonah was alive, Jesus was also alive, so that he was assumed up alive. In that case, Jesus would not be the first one to have something like this happen to him, because the Bible speaks about Enoch. Enoch walked with God. Muslims sometimes say that this is Idris. Idris, who is mentioned in the Quran in Surah 19. وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا. We have raised him to a high position. The Bible says that Enoch walked with God, and he was no more because God took him, obviously alive. And Elijah, one of the prophets in the Bible, in the book of Kings, is said to have also been taken up alive in a whirlwind. And there was always an expectation that Elijah will come back. So when we see this now, we see that everything now makes sense. What the Quran says about the crucifixion actually seems to refer to an original proclamation about Jesus. And now, the doubt that is mentioned, we saw how the Mufassirun had to struggle with that. What doubt did they have if the person looked like Jesus? Where is the doubt? They said because his face looked like Jesus, but his body looked like his friend. But now, reading the Gospels, we can see that there was some real doubt as to whether Jesus died or not, because Pilate expressed that doubt. And how could that doubt be finally removed? There has to be something real that killed Jesus. And since, as Raymond Brown says, crucifixion does not pierce any vital organ, we were left wondering what really killed Jesus in just 6 hours, whereas crucifixion usually took a few days. Now, the Gospel according to Matthew says something interesting. So we're looking at Matthew. Matthew says that on the Sabbath, meaning the Saturday, so Friday Jesus is crucified, then by evening he's put in the tomb. On the Saturday, the Jews went into Pilate's court, beseeching Pilate that he should put a guard on the tomb and seal the tomb, lest the disciples of Jesus should come and steal his body and then tell everyone that he is resurrected from the dead. And they say, then The second deception will be worse than the first.